She woke up before she knew where she was. The cold came first, sharp and unforgiving, pressing through thin cotton sheets and biting at her skin. This was not her bed. This was not her world. As her eyes opened, she saw iron bars at the foot of the bed and shadows stretching across the walls. The air smelled thick and heavy, filled with coal smoke that clung to everything. Somewhere outside, carriage wheels rattled over stone, and in that moment, she understood with a quiet dread that she was no longer in her own time. She lay still, listening. London breathed outside the narrow room, alive even in the early hours. The mattress beneath her was stuffed with horsehair, stiff and uneven, poking through the fabric. Her nightgown scratched at her neck, buttoned all the way up, as if even sleep demanded modesty. A small bell rested on the table beside her bed. Without fully knowing why, she reached for it and rang. Footsteps came almost at once. The door opened, and a young woman stepped inside, her posture straight, her clothes already neat and proper. "Good morning, miss," she said softly, dipping into a small curtsy. Her name was Mary. The maid did not wait for permission before pulling back the heavy curtains. Gray morning light spilled into the room, weak and tired, filtered through soot-streaked glass. London looked tired too, wrapped in smoke and silence. Mary moved with practiced ease, opening the wardrobe to reveal dresses layered and structured, each one more restrictive than the last. "What will you wear today, miss?" she asked, already choosing a dark blue day dress. There was no question of comfort. Clothing was not about ease. It was about rules. The dressing began. First came the long cotton underlayer, then the corset. Mary pulled the laces tight, tighter still when asked. Breath became shallow, ribs pressed inward. This was beauty. This was respectability. Petticoats followed, one after another, then the wide steel frame that forced the skirt into a perfect bell shape. By the time the dress was buttoned, her body no longer felt like her own. It belonged to society now. Mary fixed her hair into a smooth bun, every strand controlled. Its gloves were placed carefully over her hands. Bare skin was a risk, a mistake, a signal of poor character. A faint touch of citrus oil was dabbed onto a handkerchief, never directly on the skin. Smelling pleasant was allowed. Smelling tempting was not. Downstairs, the house stirred. Servants moved quietly, polishing and preparing as if noise itself was improper. Breakfast waited in the dining room. Her father sat behind a newspaper, her mother already writing letters. No one hugged, no one kissed. Affection stayed hidden, locked away like something shameful. Food covered the table: eggs, meat, bread, porridge. It was more than she wanted. But she ate slowly, carefully. The corset made sure she could not forget herself. Her mother spoke without looking up. There would be a morning call later. Congratulations must be offered. Questions must not be asked. Interest must never look like curiosity. After breakfast, there was waiting. Time was filled on purpose. Idleness was dangerous. She sat by the window with needle and thread, stitching flowers she did not care about. Her mother joined her, speaking, casually mentioning a young man who had returned from school. His name made her heart move, but her face did not change. That was the rule. Feelings were allowed only where no one could see them. When the time came, she dressed again. Bonnet, gloves, cloak, visiting cards placed neatly in her case. She walked beside her mother at a measured pace, steps small and controlled. Wide. Skirt swayed, demanding space. Men tipped their hats. She nodded once, never meeting their eyes. To look too long was an invitation. Invitations were dangerous. Mrs. Hartley's house appeared exactly when expected, neither early nor late. Butler took their cards. Inside, the room smelled of polish and restraint. Everyone curtsied. Everyone smiled carefully. The daughter sat blushing, engaged but silent. Congratulations were spoken, but nothing more. No questions, no excitement. Joy had limits. The conversation moved safely through weather and church and music, never touching anything real. After exactly 15 minutes, they stood. Anything longer would mean desperation. Anything shorter would mean rudeness. Outside again, her mother nodded in approval. The rules had been followed. Reputation remained intact. The rest of the day passed in similar fashion. Reading proper books, tea with family, piano practice measured by the clock, a change of dress. For dinner, another change before bed, each moment shaped by expectation. When the corset finally came off that night, breath returned like a secret gift. The room darkened as Mary left, carrying the lamp away. London whispered outside the window, fog creeping along the streets. Lamps glowing softly as sleep came. She thought of how tiring it was to live this way. Every step watched. Every word weighed. Yet there was comfort too. Nothing was uncertain. Everything had a rule, and tomorrow would have more of them. The next morning began the same way, with the sound of curtains being pulled back and gray light slipping into the room. Routine ruled everything. Even waking up felt scheduled, as if the house itself decided when her eyes should open. Mary stood, ready with warm water and clean cloths, already knowing what the day required. There was no asking what she wanted. Wanting was not part of the system. Today was important. A formal dinner invitation waited downstairs, placed carefully on a silver trait de ligue. The Fairchild family would be hosting, and that meant an entirely new set of rules. Dinner parties were not simple meals. They were tests. Every movement, every word, every glance could lift a reputation or quietly damage it. Preparation took hours. Her mother oversaw every detail, inspecting gloves, checking hems, adjusting posture with a gentle but firm hand. Hair was styled higher than usual. The neckline of her evening dress revealed just enough skin to be acceptable, never enough to be bold. Respectability lived in narrow spaces, and stepping outside them came at a cost. By late afternoon, the house smelled of polish and coal smoke again. Servants moved faster now, tension humming beneath their quiet efficiency. A carriage waited. Outside, riding instead of walking mattered. Appearances always mattered. The Fairchild house glowed with light as they arrived. Gas lamps burned brightly inside, casting warm reflections on polished wood and glass. The air was thick with perfume and expectation. Guests gathered in the drawing room, standing close but never touching. Laughter stayed soft. Voices never rose too high. Hunger waited patiently behind manners. She felt eyes on her as she entered. Not rude stares, but careful glances. Women measured her dress. Men noted her posture. Mothers watched even more closely than anyone else. In Victorian society, marriage was a quiet competition, and everyone knew who was being evaluated. Dinner was announced, and the room shifted. Pairs formed according to rank, not affection. She found herself walking beside a man she barely knew, chosen not by interest, but by social order. Across the room, she caught a glimpse of Thomas Fairchild. He looked composed, respectful, distant. Distance was required. Interest had to be subtle, nearly invisible. The dining table stretched long and formal, lined with silver and crystal. The number of utensils felt threatening. She waited, watching others before lifting a fork. One mistake could follow her for years. A lady who ate too eagerly, spoke too freely, or laughed too loudly would never forget it. Neither would society. Conversations stayed light. Art, travel, weather. Nothing personal, nothing honest. The meal unfolded slowly, course after course, each one a small performance. She ate little, corset pressing tight, appetite hidden behind discipline. When the ladies rose and left the table, the room filled with quiet relief. The men remained behind with their drinks and smoke. The women gathered again in the drawing room, sitting carefully, skirts arranged just right. There was comfort in shared understanding. They all lived under the same rules. They all felt the same exhaustion. Music was requested. She stood when her name was spoken, heart steady on the outside, racing beneath. Declining would be rude. Accepting too eagerly would be worse. She played with precision and restraint, letting skill show without emotion. When she finished, polite applause followed. Praise stayed measured. Excellence was admired only when it did not draw attention. Later, when the men returned, the room felt heavier. Smoke clung to coats. Laughter grew looser, but only slightly. Thomas passed near her, offering a quiet compliment. His voice was calm, but his eyes held something warmer. She answered just as calmly. Anything more would be dangerous. The evening ended exactly when expected. Guests departed in waves, careful not to be first or last. Outside, the air felt colder, but freer. Inside the carriage, her mother nodded once. The night had gone well. That was all that mattered. The following days brought whispers. Names passed, softly between teacups and sewing needles. Engagements, scandals. One woman seen riding alone with the wrong man. Another sent away quietly to live with relatives far from London. Reputation was fragile. Once cracked, it rarely healed. Then came to visit. Mary announced him with careful formality. Thomas Fairchild stood in the parlor, hat in hand, posture perfect. He had come to call, properly, during approved hours, dressed as society demanded. Her mother sat close, never leaving the room. Privacy did not exist here. Conversation unfolded slowly, safely. He spoke more to her mother than to her, as rules required, yet every so often his eyes met hers. Those moments felt louder than words. He brought an invitation for another event, delivered in person instead of by servant. That alone meant something. When he left, her mother smiled without trying to hide it. Interest had been shown, respectably, publicly. The dance had begun. From that point on, everything accelerated. More invitations, more glances, more carefully timed conversations. Her name and his began to appear together in the same sentences, spoken softly but often. The city noticed. Society always noticed. And then, one afternoon, he returned again. This time, he asked. To speak with her father, she waited in the drawing room, needle shaking in her hands. Time stretched. Every tick of the clock felt heavy. When the door finally opened and her father called for her, she already knew. Thomas stood straighter than ever, nerves hidden behind control. Words were spoken that had been rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. Permission requested. Approval granted. The world shifted in a quiet, irreversible way. When he finally turned to her and asked, his voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. She answered as expected, with grace, with restraint, with joy carefully contained. A ring slipped onto her finger, cool and heavy. It announced her future before she ever spoke again. She was no longer just a young woman navigating rules. She was a promise, and Victorian society would now watch every step she took toward marriage with even sharper eyes than before. Once the ring was on her finger, the rules changed, but they did not loosen. If anything, they tightened. Engagement in Victorian life was not a private promise. It was a public contract. Her name now appeared in letters, in newspapers, in whispered conversations over tea. Every visit, every outing, every word she spoke carried new weight. Preparations began immediately. Her mother made lists that seemed endless. Dresses for every hour of the day. Linen stitched with initials that were no longer only hers. Shoes, gloves, nightgowns, shawls. The trousseau was not about romance. It was proof of readiness. Proof that she could step into the role expected of her without faltering. Thomas visited often, always properly, always with a chaperone nearby. They walked in parks with careful distance between them, spoke in measured tones, and exchanged letters filled with respectful affection. Even now, they were never truly alone. Victorian love lived behind closed doors and unsent letters. It survived. On patience, the city watched closely. Some women smiled warmly, offering advice and praise. Others smiled thinly, hiding disappointment or envy. A few men congratulated Thomas with firm handshakes, already viewing her as an extension of his success. She learned quickly that engagement did not make her more free. It made her more visible. The wedding day arrived like a final exam. The church stood bright and solemn, filled with flowers and quiet expectation. Her dress was white, a symbol made popular by the Queen herself. White meant purity, obedience, a beginning shaped by duty. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she felt every eye on her. The past weeks, the years of preparation, the rules learned since childhood, all led to this moment. Thomas waited at the front, composed but visibly moved. When their eyes met, something honest passed between them. Not passion, not yet, but trust. In Victorian marriage, that mattered more. The vows were spoken clearly. Love was implied, not declared. Obedience was promised. Responsibility accepted. When the ring was placed on her finger again, now joined by a simple gold band, her old life ended quietly. No applause, no cheers, just polite approval and gentle smiles. She was a wife. The reception passed in a blur of congratulations and careful celebration. Nothing too loud, nothing too indulgent. Happiness was allowed, but only within boundaries. By evening, she changed into traveling clothes. A carriage waited to take them away from the city. For the first time, they sat together without watchful eyes. The silence felt strange, heavy, new. Thomas reached for her hand, slow and deliberate, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She did not. That small touch felt more powerful than all the rules she had followed her entire life. London faded behind them. In the countryside, the air smelled clean. The house waiting for them was warm and quiet, lit softly against the darkening sky. Servants stood ready, already trained to treat her as mistress. Even here, expectations followed her. Days settled into a new rhythm. She managed the household, oversaw servants, received visitors, hosted teas, wrote letters. Everything she did reflected not only on herself, but on her husband. Thomas worked long hours, returning home tired but steady. She learned how to create calm, how to listen, how to speak when needed, and stay silent when required. There were moments of loneliness. Victorian wives were not meant to complain. They were meant to endure with grace. Yet there were also moments of quiet joy, shared walks, gentle conversations, evenings by the fire where formality softened into companionship. She realized then that Victorian life was not built for happiness or sadness. It was built for order. People found their joy in the spaces between the rules, in stolen smiles, in letters folded and hidden away, in hands held just a little longer than necessary. Years would pass. Children would come. Responsibilities would grow. Society would continue, watching, judging, shaping her choices. But she understood now what it truly meant to live under Victorian social rules. They were not just restrictions. They were a language, one that everyone spoke, whether they believed in it or not. And in that language, she learned to survive. As night fell over the quiet house, she lay beside her husband, listening to the world settle around them. The same world that once felt suffocating now felt familiar, predictable, almost safe. Victorian life was not easy, but it was known, and in a world where every step had a rule, knowing what was expected could sometimes feel like comfort. She closed her eyes, letting the stillness carry her into sleep, wrapped once more in the strange, steady rhythm of a past that never truly rested.